Good day. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. As part of our summative assessment number two, today we are going to discuss a current event or issue that we are facing today. Now, on top of that, we are to resolve a moral dilemma using Scott Ray's model for moral decisions. Now, our topic is company downsizing due to COVID-19. Now, to set up the story, here's the scenario. Now, you are a senior manager at one of the four major commercial airlines in the country. Now, due to the limited COVID-19 testing and different regulations among local governments, this prevented the domestic airlines from increasing flights. Now, as a result, the company is losing money. The COVID-19 pandemic is still causing harm to the aviation sector throughout the world. Now, following weeks of evaluating and revising long-term objectives to meet the changing demands of the current situation, now the best course of action you have come up with is to lay off 10% of the employees. Now, the decision would be very difficult but necessary in order to fulfill the company's commitment to provide individuals with affordable and readily available transportation services. As the senior manager, what would you do? Will you fire the employees and leave them in the middle of the pandemic with nothing to pay for their bills and food? But on the other hand, your company will survive and start generating income. Or will you continue to operate at a loss and risk losing the company? But your employees get to have the chance to survive the pandemic. So, what would it be?
Now, to solve this dilemma, we will be using Ray's 7-step model, starting off with gathering the facts. We all know that the COVID 19 pandemic has caused hardships for everyone. Members of the society are losing their jobs because of the risk brought by the virus. Aside from that, the high demand and panic buying causes product prices to increase, and the lifestyle in each household continues, therefore, bills and other expenses are continuously incurred by individuals. Aside from that, we also know the effect that this pandemic has to the aviation sector. As we all know, the virus is transmissible, therefore, flights and other travels are restricted in order to prevent further spread of the virus. This has caused lower revenues for the aviation sector. Aside from those facts, we also know that the company is at a loss because of the regulations that prevent commercial flights. Next, we also know that the company is committed to provide affordable flights for their customers. And lastly, we know that a layoff would reduce the company's wage expenses.
So the second one is determine the social issues. To lay off 10% of the company's employees, a result of the extensive evaluations and revisions of long-term objectives, is the ethical issue that the senior manager has to take action to. It requires a difficult decision which will definitely affect the company itself or the employees and their respective families, depending on the course of action. Those who will be potentially fired may not be able to suffice their daily needs and expenses for the succeeding months if pushed through. Given the fact that life in these trying times is not that easy, and also it is hard to find another job with good compensation. If layoff was not taken into consideration, the company gets a lower chance for survival amidst the pandemic and may not fulfill its commitment to the customers. Third is determine what virtues or principles have a bearing on the case. So many stakeholders will be affected by the decision of the senior manager. With that, the principles in Kohlberg's stages of moral development is one of the things to be considered when it comes to moral reasoning, which is the greater amount of good for the greatest number of persons affected, which was in this case the company's employees and its families, as well as the customers of the airline company. And also the naively egotistical principle. The commitment given by the company with its customers of readily available transportation services is also one of the things that has a bearing on this case. And lastly, the labor law, specifically on layoffs, must be applied accordingly.
So for assessing the alternatives, we have four options. First is to lay off 10% employees with separation pay or an early retirement benefit since airline and tourism industry here in the Philippines has been greatly affected by the pandemic. Second option is that we will lay off 10% specific employees or those who have redundant positions or departments with separation pay. Third is no layoff will happen, but lesser benefits or compensation for the employees will be given if the employee will agree or have an amicable settlement. And lastly, a skeletal workforce for lesser pay and less operational expenses since most of the workers will work from home. So those are our options or alternatives for this case. So in comparing the alternative options, our first option is the retrenchment must be announced months before so that the employees who have redundant positions would not be surprised if their contracts get terminated or they will be offered an early retirement. Business is still a business, and having an airline company indeed has a lot of expenses. And due to this pandemic, the airline and tourism industry reach its lowest fallback because of restrictions that are being implemented, and since only few are traveling, there is no income that will generate no matter what we do. So with that, as long as the process is legal and it is in accordance with the labor code of the Philippines where no rights of the employees are being violated, then a layoff option is acceptable since this is an inevitable scenario in a workplace, especially during crisis. As long as a proper settlement will happen on both parties, as long as the employees would be compensated, such as having their separation pay and other benefits, it's ethical because the company is compromising this 10% for a greater good or outcome. And according to the law, this is legal. With the months of preparation after the retrenchment was announced, the employees can prepare themselves for an alternative way on how they can survive, be it by starting their own small business or try to apply or seek an opportunity in a different field or industry. There are differences when it comes to privilege, but both parties have their own families that they must feed and have their own stakeholders that they must consider as well. So for the second option, a retrenchment will not happen. Instead, the company will just propose a lesser benefit or compensation for the employees once they reach an amicable settlement. With this, no one's job and source of income would be affected since the employees would still receive something, but with a lesser amount. Hence, they can still survive and have a stable source of income at this time of pandemic. In this way, the airline company's image would not get stained since in the eyes of the public, they are being compassionate for not letting go of their employees at the time of pandemic, which can be related to the stage two, which is the naively egotistical of Kohlberg's theory of moral development. However, the question is until when the company can sustain this kind of setup, or how long would the employees take if they are exerting an amount of effort but are being underpaid.
Let's proceed to the sixth step of Scott-Reyes model. Consider the consequences. Before conducting layoffs, you need to weigh the pros and cons of the decision. So let us focus first on the positive consequences. The first consequence and primary goal of laying off is cost reduction. Laying off employees drastically reduces the amount of money spent on employee compensation, benefits, and insurance. It may also help the financially struggling airline to gain better control over its finances and to improve the viability of the company over the long term. Another benefit that the company may receive for laying off employees is getting rid of the poor performing employees. Since the layoff will be cautiously done, employee performance will be one of the major criteria for choosing the employees to be laid off. Getting rid of the poor performers would result to efficiency and optimization in the company. The third consequence is the possibility of high profit sharing benefits for the remaining employees. Since the primary goal of the airline is to rebuild its finances, this may result to better performance in the future. For a company having a profit-sharing benefit, cutting the workforce would be favorable for the remaining employees since larger percentage of income would be allocated to them. The last consequence is the opportunity of having a career shift for the laid-off employees. Laid-off employees may use their separation pay for establishing a business or for other errands such as bill settling, buying properties, adding to their savings, and the like. Moving on to the negative consequences, the first consequence is the loss of trusted and experienced employees. Even though it will be cautiously planned who to lay off, there are possibilities that senior employees or the most experienced employees will be part of it due to salary concern. Moreover, the remaining employees might seek for other jobs because of environment uncertainties, particularly the additional workload and the fear of losing their jobs. The next negative consequence is the additional expenses due to the separation pay and possible lawsuits. As we all know, the Department of Labor and Employment requires companies to give separation pay to those laid-off employees. This means that the airline should pay the employees or they will be subject for illegal dismissal, which would result to another expense. The last negative consequence we considered for this discussion is the hiring difficulties that the airline may face in the future. One of the qualities that an applicant considers when looking for a job is job stability. Since the airline would have a bad reputation in terms of laying off employees, the company might encounter difficulties in hiring future employees when a larger workforce is needed. Upon considering all the positive and negative consequences, let's proceed to the next and final step of Scott-Reyes model, which is to make a decision. After weighing the consequences, the decision of the company is to continue laying off employees while ensuring that they are properly compensated. As a senior manager of the airline, it is part of his duty to ensure that the company would survive this pandemic while considering the welfare of the employees. With continuous planning and communication, it would be more beneficial to take the risk of having this strategic layoff. This concludes our presentation. Thank you for listening.